On this week's Mailbag episode, the San Diego Padres made a splash in the form of Nick Pivetta last week, reacting to your questions about him and whether or not it was underpay, overpay, how he fits into the rotation, whether or not they have more moves to make, the rumors about Dylan Cease to the Orioles or the Red Sox, and many more questions. A lot more. Some haters, some lovers, some Alec Jacobs shoutouts, people saying they should sell the team, trade deadline value, all sorts of stuff. It's going to be a fun one. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Monday, February 17th. As always, I'm your host with sometimes, occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Reyes. You can follow me on Twitter /X and Blue Sky at Javipeno, Javiipeno. Reach out to me on there for your chance to be featured on the mailbag. You could also leave comments on the YouTube, and if you are watching on the YouTube, yes, I have some new lighting. We finally figured out some of the electrical issues in this basement that I recorded, my library of mystery, and the darkness that surrounds me no longer being dark. It is actually much brighter. Let me know if you guys like the look of it, if it's too bright, if it's too distracting. We'll try and edit those things and whatnot, maybe going forward. But just let me know. I just wanted to try this out if it's just a little bit brighter and easier for people to see. Frankly, just might be better. So that is very cool, guys. Also very cool, though, today's podcast, we got a good sponsor as always, and that is FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. And today's episode, guys, it's a mailbag. It's a big mailbag because there aren't too many developments to talk about anymore. Let's just be honest. We had one signing in the form of Alex Bregman, which I'll give my brief thoughts on. And we did have a little bit of news overall in the baseball world, don't get me wrong, but a lot of it wasn't, all that crazy. So it's just, we're getting close, guys. I mean, the regular season starts March 27th. It's really not that far off, and it's going to fly by. And I said this 2 weeks ago. I said that it's going to fly by. This next month or so is really going to go by fast. And while there is still, I imagine, some moves to make, I think that there could be some trades potentially down the pipeline overall. I think we're getting close to seeing what this Padres team is going to look like come opening day. So that should be a lot of fun, guys. But first, let me just talk really quickly. Alex Bregman agreed to a deal with the Red Sox this past weekend. It was very, very interesting only because that was the last one. We finally have the last big free agent to sign. It is annoying, don't get me wrong, but I think that it was a pretty kind of kick-ass move for the Red Sox. I really do. I think that this is a 4-win player at minimum who's going to give you great defense. His numbers at Fenway are pretty outstanding. Has a 900 OPS there in the few games that he's played. He absolutely rakes there. His power might be better suited to Fenway with the Green Monster and whatnot. And overall, I just think that it's a low-cost contract because he can opt out after every year. And while, yes, he is now by AAV one of the highest paid players in baseball, making $40 million this year, that is nuts. But it's also worth noting that he can opt out after each year. It's only a 3-year contract. Thought it was a cool deal for them, and I think that the Red Sox are going to be very, very deadly potentially coming this year. I think it's a very low-key great team, and I think they had a pretty good offseason. And I'm kind of wondering, are they going to be a trade partner? It was reported by several reporters that the Red Sox could be interested in one Sir Dylan Cease. They've actually been in talks with the Padres regarding Dylan Cease and Robert Suarez. Now, here's the thing. Dylan Cease must be whatever, man. At this point, he's what are we doing, right? This has been reported from at MassLive.com. Sean McAdam reported that the Sox have been in touch with Padres about Cease's availability. I think that Look, I kind of maintained my belief before, and I think that this is one of those things where maybe it gets interesting more down the line. Maybe it sounds towards the trade deadline. If the Red Sox are good, if the Padres are bad, maybe that's kind of the match that we'd be looking for. But the problem is also that he is a Scott Boras client, which means he's going to test free agency, which therefore means that you can't really have all that much hope that you just can re-sign him because he was there with you and whatnot. They're going to test the market. And as you just saw with Juan Soto, who literally was on a World Series team, just went over to the Mets for $700 bajillion, right? So I absolutely see that happening. And I do think that the Red Sox, they have a lot of prospects to give up offensively, not necessarily the ones that the Padres would want right now, given all of their kind of the fact that they have a lot of players locked in right now, unless maybe you go after one of their lower tier prospects, maybe you go after Tristan Cassis. But to me, the whole point about this team right now is that their rotation is now a lot more solidified since they don't know what's going on with the back end guys with their current four in Pivetta, in Cease, in King, and Darvish. With those guys, that is a pretty good rotation to start with. And then you're just hoping that they find some depth within their own system. And even with, what's his name, Kyle Hart, right? Like, even with guys like that, with some of the bullpen stuff, right? I think that overall, this rotation is set. They're not going to move Cease unless they really get I'm not going to say a Junior Caminero type of prospect, or even in the case of the Red Sox, a Marcelo Mayer prospect, but can you get something pretty good in return? Maybe. And we're going to talk about that later, as we had a couple of Orioles questions, talking about whether or not the Orioles could be a team, including from an Orioles fan, which I thought was interesting. We'll get into that, guys. But yeah, Bregman to the Sox, I think that team's going to be good. Or at least at the minimum, it seems like they might be back. Do I think it's weird that like John Henry is smoking his cigar on Instagram? You know what I mean? And he's acting like, yeah, we got Bregman. I'm like, where was this with Mookie Betts? Once again, no one but the NL West trying. Thank you, finally, for a team not in the NL West to actually try and get some good players. So shout out to the Red Sox. Could be a great signing for them. One more time, everybody go check out my thoughts on Friday detailing Nick Pivetta. We will talk about him more, and I may repeat the same stats, but overall, got into some stats, got into some vibes about what this can mean for the Padres going forward and what I mean about the rotation. And the fact that he was a favorite target of mine heading into the offseason, considering their financial restraints. Worked out pretty good, so really excited about that. Go check out that episode for more of a breakdown. Although, I imagine I might repeat some things at the end of this episode. We'll see. I guess we'll see. Joe Musgrove expressing interest, expressing, motivation to potentially return back in, that back end. Looking forward into October if the Padres were to make the playoffs. Doesn't mean too much, right? This is what a lot of guys say, I feel like, at many points. I will say that I totally believe it when it comes to Joe Musgrove. Like, I totally believe he's like, I would really want to win here, and I'm super, super competitive and whatnot. And it just stinks that he got hurt. You know what I mean? If he's on this team, this rotation looks absolutely astounding. Frankly, if he's still available on this team, because last year he was kind of up and down and just getting hurt a lot. But then when he finally got back to it and was really awesome for the rest of the season, like he was really, really great down the stretch, and it looked like the old General Joe Musgrove was back. But of course, we get Tommy John. It is a long shot, but it's at least worth talking about. Another thing that came out: Xander Bogaerts down, cut down his weight and whatnot. He's in shape. Congrats to Xander Bogaerts, maybe realizing you got to be a little bit in shape. Hey, I'll take any sign of hope when it comes to that, dude. They need him, or at least they desperately need him to at least give them something. You know what I mean? Like, this is a 2-win player last year. Granted, it was because he was hurt, but when he was playing, he's not hitting the ball hard. He's not walking. He's not swinging at first pitches all that much. We got to hope, right? We got to hope. Xander is one of this team's X factors. But a lower X factor, because I do not believe we've seen any reason why he should be better, aside from the fact that his name is Xander Bogaerts. But again, it's something to hope on for, guys. But yeah, that's it for just my opening salvos, I guess. We're going to get into some of the questions that you guys asked, which will cover the rest of the podcast. This will be a lot of fun. As always, I love answering your guys' questions, even from the haters, ladies and gentlemen. And there were haters. Oh, yes, there were. Not really, just a few. But guys, before we get into that, let me just take a second to talk to you about our sponsor for this podcast. That is the good folks over at Select Quote. Ladies and gentlemen, in sports, having winning strategy is everything. It's how the best teams make it to the Super Bowl, World Series, and even the Olympics. The same goes for life. Having a strategy like life insurance from SelectQuote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. SelectQuote makes it easy to find the perfect life insurance policy. As one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, they've helped over 2 million customers find $700 billion in coverage since 1985. Pretty good numbers. What sets SelectQuote apart is their personal touch. Unlike other brokers that offer one-size-fits-all policies, their licensed agents tailor coverage to fit your unique needs. If you're in good health, you might even qualify for same-day coverage for up to $5 million. No medical exam required, and it's more affordable than you think. You get to up to $1 million in coverage for as little as $20 a month. Get the right life insurance for you for less at SelectQuote.com/lockedon. Remember, go to SelectQuote.com/lockedon today to get started. SelectQuote, they shop, you save. And just like that, everybody, we are back, thriving and vibing here on the Locked On Padres podcast. I hope you are all doing well on this fine Monday morning, afternoon, evening, whenever. And if you're watching this on a future episode, no problemo. But remember, if you are watching from the future, past or present, wherever it is, go reach out to me at Javipeno, Javiiipeno, on Twitter, X, or Blue Sky. Love to hear from you guys, and especially would love to answer your questions every Monday, and occasionally just right then and there, right? But I usually, check on the mailbag and whatnot. Also, feel free to leave a YouTube comment, and we're going to be reading a lot from those. But first, reached out from Twitter at Mojave Madness, asked, if we had another bat, who could you see we pick up? This is a good question. I think that at this point, it's definitely not going to be like anyone major or anyone exciting. It would probably, in my opinion, be someone that is like a DH guy, right? It seems like Eggy Rosario is one of those guys that could be a DH. Obviously, I think that he's got some defensive upside too, whether it be second or third. Maybe they'll move him around a little bit. Spring training, I really do think will be a little bit interesting for this Padres team going forward. But JD Martinez would probably be the one that I think of, right? JD Martinez, he's not incredible anymore. I do think that there's a reason why he hasn't signed with any team. I just don't think he's got all that much left, right? Like it's just the unfortunate reality. He was really good for the Mets, I believe 2 years ago, was it? But overall, he just has not been all that great. He really did decline last year. But again, compared to what the Padres have, he might be a guy that they're interested in, right? Just for that reason only. 108 WRC plus last year, could be worse. And if you want to look at his stats, 318 weighted on base, expected weighted on base of 351. Maybe he got a little bit unlucky. At the minimum, as a DH option, I think would raise the floor of this offense, even if you get scared at guys who strike out as much as he does at his age. It does worry you a little bit, but still, 16 home runs in 120 games, you could do worse, right? Especially given a little bit of the unknown from this Padres team. But the fact that he's only a DH doesn't help his value as much, right? Although I imagine you could throw him in the outfield like once or twice. Did he play the outfield last year? Let me see. Did he? In 2023? No, he didn't. Okay. In 23, though, he played like 12 innings in the outfield. He did. He played a little bit in the outfield for the Dodgers. Shouts to JD Martinez just for a couple innings going out there. But yeah, overall, that would probably be the bat. If there is one. Left field is out there, but I think that they've already added the left field in Connor Joe and Jason Hayward. At Christian White, at Chris White 471 says, if Robert Suarez gets traded, who is the closer, or would it be by committee? I think that people are sleeping on what could potentially happen with Yuki Matsui if he makes a little bit of a leap this year. I do understand that he was really rough in high leverage situations last year. I just don't think that that's going to continue year to year. So I think Yuki Matsui could be a dark horse for that role. I think Jeremiah Estrada could be it. I think if Sean Reynolds keeps up his numbers, he could potentially be it. But for now, I think it's Jason Adam. I think Jason Adam has the experience. And what I like about him is he's experienced being the 8th inning guy and the 9th inning guy. He's just kind of one of those pitchers who's been used in every situation. So I really do trust him. And given what the Padres gave up for him, they must be really confident in his abilities to be a closer. So Jason Adam would be my pick there. But thank you all for the questions. Very, very much. Very, very much indeed. At Jason G. Smith 1979 says, Nick Pivetta and Kyle Hart give the Padres more depth in starting pitching. Padres already have a lot of depth in relief pitching. AJ is not done. More is coming. That's the part that I want to hone in on. I do feel like AJ isn't done. Don't get me wrong. You do get in baseball, we do have some dumb things, especially with how the media sphere is today, which we don't have to talk about again in too much detail too, where all sorts of small market teams, they're always being rumored to be in trade things, right? And especially when they're not being as covered as much. People, I think, overrate, like the Padres are in a little bit of a bad situation right now, but it's still a team that was one game away from the NLCS. It was in the NLCS not too long ago. They've got a lot of stars on this team, and they have a big budget, they have a high payroll, I should say. They're not gonna just implode and sell, right? It's a little bit weird, and I think that as a result, some people are just always assuming, right? Tatis, is he on the trade block? Harold Reynolds of MLB Network has been trying to get this guy traded for years. So while I do acknowledge that, and when I do say the Dylan Cease rumors are the type of rumors that get attached to small market teams where it's see, they had one, they're a little bit bad, they're broke, they must trade everything now, send them to LA, send them to New York, send them to Boston, Philly, whatever, right? I am a little bit like, there is a feeling of like, is AJ Preller looking at it? I, for the most part, think if there's another move, it will be a small bat, small reliever, that type of thing. Maybe your Kyle Hart type of moves, right? I just think that he's only trading him because this is still a team built to win now, right? Even if it's not the most exciting built to win now team, like, or at least the most favored built to win now team, it's still a team that's built to win now. Like you're supposed to go for it. What are you supposed to do? Trade Manny and reset? You can even do that if you wanted to. So I don't see why they want to just try and go for it now. I think he's only trading him if a team gets desperate and they're like, you know what? Give us Dylan Cease. We need another good starter. I just don't think he's trading him for nothing just to get salary relief. Frankly, I think people thought that was what was going to happen with Juan Soto, where they're like, yeah, he's going to want to get some stuff back, but they mostly just have to move on from him. And then they end up getting a lot of good players in return, including Michael King, who ends up being a superstar, right, for this team. So that's kind of where I'm at. Oops, sorry. Oh, I knocked out one of my guys. So that's where I'm at. I do think another move is coming. I don't think it's Cease. I think it's just a little small thing, but we'll see. We'll see. And speaking of Cease, at Zemitram1779, in response to my video about Nick Pivetta, says, only if they keep Cease and King. I assume you mean it's only a good move if they keep them. I think it's a good move no matter what. I really do. I think that's just a solid pitcher who has some decent upside. It is a lot more exciting if they are able to keep Dylan Cease and Michael King, right? For sure. And I think it might signal that. I think that there is some slight indication they'd like to keep them. But overall, I think Padre land isn't an ultimate happiness if they don't keep those two, because remember, they don't have any pitching prospects right now. Could they materialize by the end of the year? I absolutely think that. Could Cash Mayfield make a leap and all of a sudden he's a top 50 prospect? It could happen. It's happened many times under Preller. The guy just knows, has a great eye for talent, right? We'll see. I don't think it's all beyond end all, but I understand what you're saying. A little bit of a Brandon Evans. I liked you commenting on my channel. It's always really fun stuff from you, my guy. He says, shout out to Alec Jacobs. I saw him last year when the Chihuahuas were playing the Bees. Some little kid snuck a baseball under the net for him to sign when he was sitting in the bullpen. Alex saw the ball fall to the dirt and just walked away from it. It was really funny. Players are hilarious, man, when it comes to fan interactions. Shout out Alec Jacob. We'll say, though, could be a guy out of this bullpen. I really do think that there's some talent in the trenches lurking for this Padres bullpen. I am not freaking out that much about losing Tanner Scott. I'm freaking out more that he went to the Dodgers, not as much that the Padres lost him. I think it's okay to not super overpay relievers. I think that they can be really volatile sometimes, but hey, what do I know? But let me tell you, the vibes are not good for Todd Davis 3731, who says the King and Pivetta contracts show us how utterly disastrous the Padres' financial situation really is. Those hugely backloaded contracts indicate that there are severe cash flow problems, and are giving off vibes of desperation. The team is currently saddled with huge long-term deals to Machado, Bogaerts, Tatis, Cronenworth, Darvish, etc., leaving the current ownership group unable to properly manage the team financially. Signing King and Pivetta to those types of contracts is just kicking the can down the road. The only logical solution is to sell the team to an owner who has the ability to absorb those contracts and still manage to spend money to improve the team. The fans of San Diego deserve better than to see their team eroded down to mediocrity due to finances. I think sell the team is a little bit extreme, sir. Just a little bit extreme. Just a tiny bit extreme. But I do emphasize with the idea that they've been kicking the can down the road. That's totally possible. For right now, I don't know what else they can do. If they're still trying to be competitive with their huge payroll, what are you going to do? You can't trade any of their contracts. You could trade Tatis, but we're not doing that. You can't trade Manny. You can't trade Bogaerts. You can't trade Cronenworth. Although Cronenworth has been getting more, according to reports, a little bit more interest than I think people are letting on. I think the low AAV is helping them out there just a little bit. And that teams know he'd be better at second base, which I think he's going to play more this year, which is exciting. But sell the team is a little bit dramatic. I think we got to wait just a tiny bit more before we start going that direction. Someone, you know who needs to sell the team? The Mariners guys, the Pittsburgh guys. Pittsburgh, who hasn't given out a multi-year free agent deal in 10 years. Those people need to sell the team, right? Padres, I'm like, let's wait a little bit longer, folks, before we say sell the team. You know what I mean? So let's just wait on that. More moments though from my guy Brandon Evans. He said, "Just to spite you, Javi, I'm now saying Jackson Merrill will turn into Ronald Acuna Jr. next year." For those who don't know, I talked about on my 7 biggest questions episode. One of my questions was, is Jackson Merrill going to have a sophomore slump? And if you look at recent years, a lot of players have had good seasons. They haven't been like the disasters. I'm not saying this guy's going to go from a 5-win player to a .7. And he's just going to be a mess, and we totally overreacted, and he's super overrated. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that I do think the Padres should be careful to see if that could happen, right? Corbin Carroll, Michael Harris, Julio Rodriguez, all these guys had little setbacks in their own ways. But I'm still very confident about Merrill, but we'll see. And Ronald Acuna Jr., man, let me tell you, man, you're shooting quite high with that one. I would settle for him being Corbin Carroll again next year, you know what I mean? Not the first half Corbin Carroll from last year, but just being himself again. 4.5 win player, I'll freaking take it, man. But we'll see. Another comment though from the haters at DrewDown2548. Lockdown podcasts are so bad I just can't take you seriously. And I can't take this comment seriously, but I still read my comments every now and then. And I must say, shouts to all of you who do enjoy it. And we're going to talk to that, especially. We're going to mention some of the people who did send me some kind words in just a second, guys, but we got to take another break to talk about one of our sponsors, and that is the one from the beginning of the whole episode. That is our friends over at FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the action, even if you miss some of the action, I should say, even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. You should check it out, guys. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And just like that, everybody, we are thriving and vibing into the final segment of this here podcast, guys. Again, also, speaking of questions, remember, let me know what you think of the lighting. I think it looks brighter and kind of nice, but I could be wrong. Maybe the glare isn't great. I don't know. Maybe some Locked On people will reach out and you guys won't even have a choice. Maybe this is the illusion of choice that I'm giving you guys right now, and Locked On is going to tell me that I got to fix it. But whatever, we'll see. Moving on to some more questions, though, because we got some more haters. Guys. Let's get them out of the way. Hope Springs a Turtle 2624 says, "Poor Javier. I feel so sorry for him. I notice you are not slurping water on this broadcast. And by the way, I usually stop watching you about a third away through your broadcast. Have a great day. You too, sir." I'm still dying over Hope Springs a Turtle. Last week talking about I hate this guy and he's always slurping water during the breaks because I forgot. I pressed resume at the wrong time and entered back into the podcast and I was still drinking my water, which, yeah, a little behind the hood, opening up the curtain, guys. I take a little bit of a water break when I go to the ad transition, so there you go. But that's just really funny. That gets me. And then another hater comment from, you guessed it, Los Dodgers 81, Fernando Tat cheats. You know what? I like that one. That one was pretty good. Do me a favor, though, and Google Mookie Betts in 2018, and then also Google a litany of other players in baseball. I think that the cheating stuff in sports, I will always say this, I think it's weird. I think it's weird only because, especially in baseball, by the way, you know how many roids, PEDs, sign stealing, everything I can find? And again, I think it's just very telling that fans show this energy for cheating, but then really darker things that happen with players, they're like, whatever, we don't have to boo him. It's just weird to me, man. It's always been weird. But I have to admit, Tot cheats, not bad. That's a little bit of a bar, man. I give you that one. Moving on, though, in all seriousness, guys, I do want to give a shout out to the people who do send me a lot of kind words. I literally have had some friends on this podcast. Shout out to my Australian homie. I know you're listening, that I talk to plenty amount. A lot of you guys that reach out, love communicating with you. For the most part, the way I view it is everybody's mostly positive. It's just fun to kind of talk and just respond to some of the guys, because it does make me laugh sometimes that people will just be so inclined to be mean to someone who hasn't been mean to them. it's just about sports. Sometimes I get it if I were to tweet like, this person should die or this person stinks or whatever, like in a mean way. I kind of get if that person was like, hey, what the heck? But overall, I'm like, it's just wild, like how your brain works that way. It's just wild. But anyway, speaking of those people, at Daniel Lander LE9711, you do a great job, Javier. Always enjoy your work. Keep it up. Thank you, sir. And another one from another nice lad, my dude, Jose QW6NV says, ain't a Padres fan, but I enjoy your podcast. So refreshing than other baseball podcasts. Just chilling and talking ball. I'm glad that this is very chill for you, good sir. And thank you again for everybody for listening. I'm very excited as the season gets underway for what is now going to be my 5th season. Crazy. Very, very crazy. At Silas Robert Shaw he asks, he has another question. On a different note, how about the Dan Shea letter to San Diego about the ownership situation? Silas, I did check this out. I'm not overly familiar with Mr. Dan Shea and whatnot, but I will say the letter was very well written. I thought he sounded very compassionate. For those who don't know, Dan Shea's kind of like just a little bit involved in the San Diego community and sort of like, outreach and some stuff like that, and basically was on the side of Sheila Seidler, saying that the Seidler brothers have been misrepresenting her and misrepresenting that they kind of make it seem like she was taking advantage of Peter and being like, yeah, give me the control, that way I can make these decisions, when it really wasn't. Look, the way I feel about this is the same. I gotta wait a little bit to see more stuff about this. I just think it's a really complicated situation that we're not going to find out too much about until the court trial and all that stuff goes down. So we'll see. But for now, thought it was well written. And again, I'm not taking any side currently right now. The only thing that I will say, I understand people who, when it came out that they weren't bringing back Profar, that he signed with the Braves, and that when Michael King was reportedly on the trade block, I do understand people being frustrated with the Kevin Acee articles in the Tribune immediately dropping when that happened. And they were very pro, Rob and Matt, essentially pro Padres stuff. I understand the timing of that is not great, and I understand some people have criticized Acee of being a little bit shill-ish in regards to his past with the Chargers, although I am admittedly unfamiliar with that side of him. So I get it, but me personally, I gotta wait a little bit longer before I'm ready to issue any sort of verdict. Speaking of waiting a little bit longer to issue any sort of verdict, ladies and gentlemen, the Orioles, are they still in the lurk? Are they lurking in the shadows for Dylan Cease? At Galansky, he replies, the Orioles offered Corbin Burnes what would have been the largest contract in team history, but Arizona was a perfect fit for him. He lives there, and spring training for the D-backs is there, a no-brainer for Corbin. The problem with what you're asking for Dylan Cease, who's great, but he's just another one-year rental like Burnes. Too much. As an O's fan, I'd even hate to lose Heston Kjerstad, who has a very high ceiling. The only plus in a trade for Cease is that, unlike Burnes, he's an East Coast guy, so potentially the Birds would have a better chance to re-sign him. But still, he's going to be sought by many teams, so no guarantee. From the Padres side, I think keeping him makes more sense, because he's needed to top a rotation in a very tough division, and to deal him is to give up. If they're out of the NL West race by All-Star break, then trade him, because the demands will be great for contenders. I root for San Diego for various reasons, including Manny Machado being a Padre. And by the way, Rock Kubatsko's first name is pronounced Rock. So I said Roach, I think, in the last one. It is Rock. So my response to this is, first of all, there's no evidence, according to Corbin Burnes, that they did offer him a contract. Has not been said. That they expressed maybe an interest, but there was never anything written. There was never any formal offers. They said that the Blue Jays were one, so that is not what I heard, good sir. And I would criticize the team not keeping one of its best players. Sorry, guys. I was trying to, crack my knuckles for a second and it slipped. So I disagree with that. I also disagree with the idea that Heston Kjerstad is too much. At some point, y'all, you do not want to be Danny Ainge. If you know who Danny Ainge is, he's the former GM of the Celtics, who basically every year was dangling around players to trade, and he would never trade them. Everything seemed like people were asking for too much, right? And he would just do that forever, and then they brought in someone new, and they were like, all right, let's just get some good players. At some point, you have to give up assets. They're not going to give you Dylan Cease for less than... I understand I understand Basallo. I understand Kobe Mayo being off the table. Heston Kjerstad, dude, really? At some point, you have to give up a good player in order to get a good player. So I do disagree with that, but I also understand the idea. I just think that the Orioles might be desperate because of the fact that they just totally struck out in free agency when it came to starting pitching, and their chances of win a World Series, as far as I'm concerned, are zero because of the lack of spending in that area. They just do not look like a serious team when it comes to the starting rotation, even if that lineup is awesome. Awesome stuff. I just think that they got a little bit too gun shy. And it stinks because they got a new ownership and it didn't change anything. So we'll see what happens. Do they get desperate or not? Another question from @DrewRockwell8000 says, what is your favorite Padres memory? My brother, I got plenty. Over the years, man. In fact, as the offseason goes down, maybe I'm going to do an episode on best Padres moments of the last 5 years. Might do that. I'm going to write it down now, actually. But me personally, little anecdotal, my favorite is the Tatis go-ahead home run with 2 outs, down 3-2, or I forgot what the score was. Maybe was it 4-2? I don't remember, but it was against the Astros, in which he hit the home run, in which Don Orsillo lost his mind, says that it's going out to the track. That one, when he spins the medallion, the reason being, I was also, on top of it just being an amazing moment, and it being like, I cannot believe that this guy's on our team. He just always comes through. I was with my friend, visiting friends for like the first time since things started to open up post-COVID, or I should say post-thick of COVID, let's put it. I was down in DC with my friend, and we were at a baseball game, and we had the game on my phone, and we just said, "Oh my God!" You know what I mean? Like, it was just a crazy like moment to share that with each other. So that's my personal favorite memory. Another one, Jorge Mateo's walk-off hit, or I'm sorry, Jurickson Profar's walk-off hit against the Rockies, in which Jorge Mateo scored. It's the one where he's, for people who are watching on YouTube, he's like, his bright shining face and everything. And it was on, I believe, I forgot which holiday it was on, but it was really fun. I was watching it outside, social distancing and all that at the time, on the projector of my friends with just 2 other people. We were watching that, just freaking out, like that's just what happened. It was a really fun night. So shouts to those 2 moments being very special to me, even if they aren't overall the best. Dodgers beating the Dodgers in the playoffs in 22 obviously is amazing, all that stuff, but those are some ones for me. @Tony Sue 8860 says, in my opinion, signing Pivetta to the contract that was agreed to is an optimistic move, and only because the Padres think he can be better than recent years, because if Pivetta remains a number 4 starter or worse, the Padres overpaid. But the Padres have this big problem with the rotation that is good and full of potential. With the rotation that is as good and full of potential as the front 3 are, there is a big drop-off and uncertainty what anyone else can provide. Pivetta is unknown potential that might fill in more reliably if any of the 3 can't pitch for a few games. If he provides enough, if he improves enough, I can't speak, I'm sorry guys. If he improves enough to either lower his ERA a half run or more, or pitch at least 30 more games than the 150 or so he's been doing, 30 or more innings, I should say, than the 150 or so he's been doing, then he'll be a solid contributor. As it is now, for the money the Padres are paying him and the pick he costs, Pivetta is being guaranteed an active roster spot on opening day, which means the competition is that much more for the 5th and regular rotation spot and a possible 6th spot. And also shout out San Diego saying in a reply, I've gambled a lot on Pivetta and he's always lost for me. So shouts to you, sir. I disagree, Tony. I think this is a pretty good contract for the most part. In terms of this year, A++, right? Making barely any money. Like, that's just the reality. He's just not making any money. But when it comes to the year after, he does make $20 million after that, right? Like, he is going to get a little bit more. But to me, the reason why I like the contract so much is because of their financials, because of the situation they're in. I think that you're underestimating this guy's potential, and I think you're underestimating what it means to just have a guy who's going to fill innings. He's also got some opt-outs too. Don't get me wrong. If he's just number 4 quality, yeah, it's not the best in the world, but he's been that for the past few years. He's been worth, I think, what they gave him. And I do think that with Petco, with the strikeouts and all of that, I just think he's solid and he's going to eat innings. I think on this team, it is better to have that and pay that than it is to be relying on Randy Vasquez, who might just have those games where he goes 3 innings, gives up 6 hits, 3 earned runs. You know what I mean? And then he has to get pulled. That's how I feel. I just think he's been a little bit more proven. But again, I take your question. You also said, it's too bad if Preller can't swing some deal for at least one of, if not two, Orioles outfield prospects. Everyone knows the Orioles are in the midst of 5 or 6 really promising outfield prospects, all coming to the majors almost at the same time. And of course, you can only play 3, so all the others would be surplus trade bait. Naturally, Preller would have to consider why anyone would cut loose from the Orioles organization, and I would almost never consider an outfield prospect anywhere close to the value of any of the Padres' likely starters, but there could possibly be a deal or some sort between 2 organizations. I agree mostly. I think the Orioles are being really weird right now, though. I can't tell what they want. I can't tell if they're being serious or if they're going to go the way of what happens with a lot of teams that don't spend, which is we keep maybe one of our stars and then we just slowly lose the rest and then kick the can down the road. Someone used that term earlier. I also use it for teams that don't spend. Right? Teams that aren't spending and they're just like, whatever, we'll find more prospects and hopefully it works out again that time. So we'll see though. Will they get desperate enough? We'll see. But I do think they're amassed. And again, I do think that we have to hope that the Padres can get something pretty big out of Dylan Cease if they do trade him. At RichJ9 says, right in the middle of 2023, Xander had a 400 at-bat stretch with a 244, 310, 360 slash. He salvaged his season with a huge September, but by the time he came around, the season was over. It was a very hollow 4.6 WAR season. First of all, right in the middle of it, yeah, but it's not just August, right? It was also September, October, and also I remember him being a little bit better in July as well. But I do agree with what you're saying. The 4.6 wins, what is a little bit misleading by Fangraphs. That's a great WAR total, and if he did that this year, that'd be great. But just to give you an idea, like that's like what Tatis or like only a little bit below what Merrill did. It was a misleading WAR in the sense that he did not actually help the Padres win as much because he was dreadful with runners on base. Like genuinely one of the most appalling numbers I've ever seen. I'm pretty sure Gary Sanchez only finished with like 10 less RBIs than him. It was insane. And Gary Sanchez was brought on in July. I think that with Xander though, what he did show you in 23 is that the skills, like the ability to just hit well, was still there. That's why his 24 was so disappointing, where it's like, well, what happened here? You know what I mean? Like, we understand why you struggled at one point because you got hit on the wrist. But other than that, you showed us that you were back. And then in 2024, you were extremely not back. You were worse than you've ever been in the limited time that he did play. So we'll see. But I do agree. The 4.6 WAR, that's why you can't take WAR in 100% of a vacuum, right? Like, you got to give context to it sometimes. So I agree on that regard. Last question, though. It comes from my man Cam Wordplay. Now that the Padres have signed Pivetta, Kyle Hart, as well as Hayward, Joe, Gavin Sheets, and Diaz, I think, Elias Diaz and Connor Joe, by the way, I think AJ is probably done adding free agents and maybe satisfied or stuck with what he has, unless he can significantly improve our left field, first base DH, catching or long-term salary situation via trade. The most beneficial move might be trading Robert Suarez for a decent catcher with a few years of control. But that said, I have 2 questions. Thank you, sir. I appreciate your thoughts and giving your question. If we hold on to Dylan Cease and Michael King until the deadline, when we will know how the season is shaking out, how much will we lose in trade value for one of them versus making the deal right now? And 2, when AJ brought in a big-time lefty reliever and also added a surprisingly good southpaw to starting rotation Martin Perez, we saw Shohei, Freddie Freeman, and other lefty hitters striking out instead of teeing off on our wealth of righties and relatively weak lefties, including Matsui and Morejon. And we almost went to LCS. So, what are we expecting this year with very little added in the way of left-handed pitching? Hart could be a dominant in the rough, but his track record in the U.S. is pretty sketchy, and Tanner Scott now pitches for the enemy. I like what you're saying about lefties, dude. I like what you're saying about lefties. However, I will say, don't want to just build your team only to beat the Dodgers. Remember, this is a team that has been, every other year, has been in the playoffs, in the World Series hunt, and then out of it, least clutch team of all time. So for now, I think the Padres are like, Lee just got to be good. I don't care lefty-righty. But I do emphasize that will be something to keep an eye on as the season goes along, whether or not they have some struggle with the fact that they don't have enough lefties. But I will say with your first question, I don't know. I think the value would go down for sure, but I think that Preller knows that, and I still think that if a team is good, because that's the other thing, to make up for the fact that you only get half of a season with Dylan Cease, what makes up for it is I do think pitchers are coveted a little bit more at the deadline. Because teams know if we're a playoff team, let's assume the Orioles are like, we're definitely going to make the playoffs. I think they're like, you know what? Pitching wins. You're going to need some pitchers to step up. We cannot just hope that random guys do well. You can have decent pitchers. Maybe you don't need aces, right? Maybe you don't need superstars. I think Jordan Montgomery's a great example. Gets traded to Texas. He was just always solid. Then he had his moments in the playoffs. I think that makes up for it, is that pitching is just a little bit more value and coveted at the trade deadline, so you could still get a lot for those teams that are competing. So I'm okay with waiting, even if it means you might not get that superstar prospect. I think you can get stuff. I do. And if the Orioles are good, the Red Sox are good, I could see them saying, you know what, we want to bring in Cease. We need a guy that we can throw out there and trust. So we'll see. And then in terms of Martin Perez, I will say, though, a lot of people like to bring up Perez. His peripherals weren't good, guys. He got a really high FIP. I think he was getting a little bit lucky. He was striking out batters more for sure, but I don't think he had, and I think there's a reason why he hasn't been signed, especially with that good end to his season. I think he gets a little bit overrated because of the ERA. He was fine. He had his moments, but I do, again, emphasize with your notes on left-handed pitching. Perhaps that is a thing that we'll talk about in a future episode. But that is for the future, guys, because the present is now done. That about does it for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Remember to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. Follow me on Twitter/X and Blue Sky at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO. Let me know your thoughts on the lighting if you're watching the video, and any other questions about the Padres you may have. Really good vibes, guys. Really good vibes right now. It's exciting. I'm just excited to have baseball back in my life. It's so comforting. You know what I mean? It's so comforting to have that. It's great. But until that next time, guys, stay safe. And, of course, stay faithful, my Fire Faithful homies. Take care.